She saved a Comanche baby in a blizzard. Days later, one howled across the endless plains, carrying with it icy shards of snow that stung the skin and cut through even the thickest layers of clothing.
The winter had arrived with an unusual fierceness that year, and the sky was a swirling gray, heavy with more snow yet to fall. Trees bent under the weight of the frost, and the roads were nothing more than trails hidden beneath a thick, white blanket. In the midst of this frozen wilderness, a woman moved carefully, each step deliberate as she fought against the biting wind. Her name was Clara, known in the small settlement nearby for her bravery and her unwavering kindness. But even her courage would be tested on this particular day, for nature itself seemed determined to challenge her. Clara had been traveling back from a neighbor's home, carrying a small basket of supplies meant to help an elderly couple who were struggling to survive the harsh winter. The path she followed was difficult even in good weather, but now it was nearly invisible beneath the thick, drifting snow. Every step required careful placement to avoid sinking into the icy crust that threatened to conceal hidden rocks or deep snowdrifts. Her breath came in white clouds that vanished almost as soon as they appeared, and her hands, though gloved, felt the relentless sting of the cold. Her face was red from exposure, and yet she pressed on, driven by a simple but powerful determination to help those in need. As she trudged along, Clara's ears caught a faint, almost imperceptible sound above the wind, a cry. It was soft at first, easy to dismiss, and she wondered if she had imagined it. But then it came again, more insistent this time, and she realized that someone, or something, was in trouble. She paused, listening carefully, straining to catch the direction of the sound. It was faint and fragile, carried away and back by the gusts, yet unmistakably human. A chill ran down her spine, not from the cold, but from the thought of someone suffering alone in such a merciless storm. Instinct pushed her forward. She moved cautiously, scanning the white expanse around her. Trees and rocks emerged as ghostly shapes in the gray haze, and the snow swirled so heavily that it was almost impossible to see more than a few feet ahead. The wind roared in her ears, and yet she could still hear it, the desperate cry of a small child. Her heart pounded as she followed the sound, each step slower than the last, for she knew that one false move could send her tumbling into a drift, or worse, leave her stranded in the storm. After what felt like an eternity, Clara spotted a small, barely visible shape lying half buried in the snow near the edge of a forest. She rushed forward, the snow clinging to her boots and clothes, the cold biting through her layers. But she did not stop. As she reached the small bundle, she realized with a shock that it was a baby. Tiny, fragile, and trembling. The child was wrapped in nothing more than a thin, tattered cloth. Its cheeks were red and raw from the cold, and its small hands were stiff with frost. The cries had grown weaker, and Clara felt a deep surge of fear. If she had arrived even a few minutes later, the baby might not have survived. Without hesitation, she scooped the baby into her arms, feeling the tiny body shiver violently against her chest. She held it close, wrapping her coat around it to provide as much warmth as possible. Breaths. Every instinct screamed at her to move quickly, to get the child somewhere safe, but the storm was relentless. The wind blew fiercely, and snow whipped across her face, blurring her vision. The journey back home, which should have taken only minutes, now felt impossible. Her legs ached with the effort, and every step required immense concentration to avoid slipping on the icy ground. As Clara moved, she spoke softly to the baby, her voice a gentle contrast to the harshness of the storm. Rasp. "It's okay, little one," she whispered, pressing the child closer. "I've got you."
"You'll be safe with me." She repeated the words over and over, hoping that the warmth of her voice and the closeness of her body might calm the frightened child.
The baby whimpered but did not cry loudly, its small body gradually relaxing against her chest, as if sensing her determination and care. The landscape around her was a blur of white, and the familiar landmarks of her journey had disappeared beneath the snow. Each step was a challenge, the path almost unrecognizable, But Clara's focus never wavered. She thought of the baby's parents, if they were even nearby, and of the dangers that the storm posed. The thought of leaving the child alone in such conditions was unbearable. Her mind raced with possibilities, yet she did not allow fear to paralyze her. Instead, she drew on a deep well of resolve, moving steadily despite the wind that threatened to knock her off her feet. Hours seemed to pass as she struggled through the blizzard, though in reality it may have been only minutes. Perhaps her body was numb from the cold, and her lungs burned with each breath, but she could feel the baby's warmth against her chest, a small but constant reassurance.
At last, through the swirling snow, the familiar outline of her home emerged.
Clara's heart leapt with relief, and she quickened her pace, knowing that safety and warmth were just within reach. The baby's cries had stopped altogether, replaced by a faint, almost imperceptible sigh of relief. Inside her home, the fire crackled warmly in the hearth, sending waves of heat into the small room. Clara carefully placed the baby on a pile of blankets near the flames, wrapping it securely in every layer she could find. She fed the child warm milk, rubbed its tiny hands and feet to restore circulation, and whispered words of comfort that seemed to travel straight into its small, frightened heart. The storm continued to rage outside, but inside the home there was a fragile sense of safety, a small sanctuary created by her courage and compassion. Clara stayed with the baby through the long night, listening to the howling wind outside and checking constantly to make sure the child was breathing and warm.
Every time she looked at its tiny face, she felt a mixture of awe and responsibility.
The baby's life had been entrusted to her by fate, and she was determined not to let it down. Sleep was impossible, not because of exhaustion alone, but because her mind was filled with the magnitude of the task she had taken on. She knew the days ahead would be challenging, yet at that moment the only thing that mattered was that the baby survived the night. By the time the first light of dawn began to filter through the frosted windows, Clara had grown both physically and emotionally exhausted. Yet when she looked at the baby, she felt a profound sense of purpose and a quiet triumph. Against all odds, she had found the child, had protected it from the merciless storm, and had brought it safely home. The blizzard outside still raged, but inside there was hope. She had faced the fury of nature and emerged not just victorious, but transformed by the simple, powerful act of saving a life. Clara knew that this was only the beginning. The storm had tested her courage, but the real challenge, keeping the baby safe, understanding who it belonged to, and navigating the unknown consequences of her actions, was yet to come. Still, in that quiet morning light, with the baby sleeping peacefully in her arms, she allowed herself a brief moment of relief and gratitude. The bond formed in the harshest of conditions was already strong, and she knew that whatever came next, she would face it with the same unwavering determination that had carried her through the blizzard. The morning after the blizzard left the plains, buried under a thick, sparkling blanket of snow, Clara found herself sitting beside the small bundle she had rescued. The baby slept quietly, wrapped in layers of blankets that she had carefully arranged near the fire. The warmth of the hearth cast soft light across the room, and the steady crackle of the flames was a comforting rhythm after the chaos of the storm. Clara felt both relief and a lingering tension. Relief that the child had survived. Tension because she knew that the storm was not the only danger. The child belonged to someone, a family perhaps now frantic with worry. Clara had saved a life, but she had also entered a delicate situation she did not fully understand. As she fed the baby small portions of warm milk, she tried to think through what needed to be done next. The child's cries had been soft now, only occasional whimpers, but Clara could feel the fragility in its tiny body. She knew that even a few hours of neglect could be dangerous. Her hands shook slightly as she cradled the child, her mind racing with questions. Who were the parents? Where had the baby come from? And most importantly, How would the family respond to the news that a stranger had taken their child? She could imagine anger and suspicion, yet she could not ignore the small life that depended entirely on her. Outside, the settlement began to stir. Breath. Neighbors emerged cautiously from their homes, brushing snow from their coats, their breath visible in the cold air. They whispered among themselves as they caught sight of Clara's home, and rumors began to spread. Someone had seen her return late in the storm carrying what appeared to be a child. Others had noticed the trail of footprints leading to her door. While some expressed admiration for her courage, others worried about how the child's family or the local Comanche tribe might react. Paid it little mind. Her focus was entirely on the baby. The baby stirred in her arms, blinking up at her with large, curious eyes. Clara smiled softly and stroked its tiny head, feeling a bond forming that went beyond explanation. The child's warmth, fragile yet insistent, filled the room and warmed her heart in ways the fire never could. She whispered gently, "You're safe now. I won't let anything happen to you." The baby cooed softly, a tiny sound of trust that gave her courage. Even in the face of uncertainty, she knew she had made the right choice. She had acted out of instinct, compassion, and a sense of responsibility that refused to allow fear to dominate. Throughout the day, Clara kept the baby close, tending to its every need. She gathered soft blankets and stacked them near the fire, checked the warmth of the milk, and rocked the child when it became restless. The outside world felt distant, almost unreal, as the woman focused entirely on protecting this tiny life. Yet she could not ignore the thought that lingered in the back of her mind. The Comanche were nearby. The plains were their land, and the child was undoubtedly part of their community. What would happen when they discovered the child had been taken in by a stranger? Clara's heart pounded with both fear and hope. Fear for the confrontation that might come. Hope that they would understand her intentions and see that her actions were driven only by compassion. As evening fell, the wind howled outside once more, though gentler than the storm of the previous day. Clara kept the fire burning and sat beside the baby, listening to the quiet sounds of the settlement breaths. Occasionally a neighbor would approach and offer assistance, a warm meal, a reassuring word, but Clara politely declined. She wanted to handle this responsibility alone, at least for now. The baby had survived the blizzard because of her vigilance, and she could not allow anyone else to disrupt the fragile security she had built. She thought about the people in the surrounding settlements, many of whom had their own challenges during the harsh winter. Yet she felt a sense of pride that, in the midst of so much struggle, she had been able to act decisively when it mattered most. Clara's thoughts drifted to the Comanche tribe. She had heard stories of their bravery, their skills in navigating the plains, and their strong family bonds. She knew that her actions could be misunderstood as theft or disrespect, yet she also knew that saving a life was a universal gesture, one that transcended language and culture. The idea that her choice to protect the child could one day forge understanding between different communities gave her a quiet hope, even as her immediate concern was simply keeping the baby safe through the night. That night, Clara did not sleep. She sat beside the fire, holding the baby close, watching its chest rise and fall with each fragile breath. Occasionally, she would peer through the frosted window, half expecting to see a group of warriors approaching. Her imagination painted vivid scenarios: angered parents demanding the child back, or worse, misunderstanding and suspicion leading to conflict. Yet none of these thoughts could shake her resolve. Fast, she had made a choice that no one else could take back, and she was determined to stand by it. The baby's life had been saved once, and she would ensure it remained safe. The following morning, Clara rose early, determined to prepare for whatever might come. She gathered food and supplies in case she needed to travel or offer provisions to the child's family. She reviewed her home, ensuring it was as warm and secure as possible. First, the baby, still weak from its ordeal, clung to her fingers, a silent reminder of the responsibility she carried. Each small movement, the baby's coo, its tiny grasp, the soft flutter of its eyelids, reinforced the weight and the importance of her actions. To realize that this was more than simply rescuing a life. It was a test of character, a challenge that demanded patience, courage, and compassion in equal measure. As the day wore on, neighbors approached once more, curious and cautious. Some offered blankets or warm food, while others simply watched from a distance, unsure how to respond. Clara explained gently that the baby had been found alone in the snow, shivering in near death, and that she had brought it home to protect it. The reactions were mixed, admiration from some, concern from others, but all seemed to recognize the urgency and necessity of her actions. Though she remained wary of outsiders, she felt a quiet satisfaction that at least a few understood the nature of her decision. The sun began to dip low in the sky, casting long shadows across the snowy plains. Clara settled beside the fire once more, watching the baby sleep. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees, carrying with it the memory of the blizzard that had nearly claimed the child's life. Clara knew that this calm was only temporary. The real challenge, the meeting with the Comanche, the explanation and the uncertainty of their reaction was still ahead. But she allowed herself a moment to breathe, to feel the warmth of the fire, the small weight of the baby in her arms, and the quiet power of having made a choice that saved a life.
As darkness fell completely, Clara looked down at the baby and whispered, "You're safe now."
We'll face whatever comes together. The words, simple and heartfelt, carried more weight than any reassurance she could have offered herself. The baby stirred slightly, a tiny hand reaching toward her, and Clara understood that a bond had been formed, one that would guide them both through the challenges ahead. She did not know exactly how the Comanche would react, nor what the future held, but she did know this: courage, compassion, and patience could navigate even the harshest storms. Night passed slowly, with Clara maintaining a careful watch over the child. Every sound outside, the wind rattling the windows, the distant howl of a wolf, the crunch of snow on the frozen ground, made her tense. But she never wavered. The baby's fragile breathing, warm against her chest, became a rhythm she relied upon, a reminder of why she had risked everything in the storm. By the first light of dawn, she felt a renewed determination. Whatever lay ahead with the Comanche tribe, she would face it with honesty, courage, and the unwavering desire to protect the life she had saved. In those quiet moments before the sun fully rose, Clara realized that saving the baby was only the beginning. The days ahead would test her in ways she could not yet imagine. But she also felt an unexpected sense of peace, knowing that she had acted with a pure heart, guided only by kindness and necessity. The bond between her and the child born in the fiercest storm was unbreakable. And as the snow began to melt slightly under the weak winter sun, Clara understood that courage and compassion could create light even in the coldest and darkest places. The days following the blizzard passed slowly, but for Clara, time felt heavier than ever. Each morning she awoke to the faint light of dawn filtering through the frost-covered windows and the soft, fragile breaths of the baby beside her. The child had grown stronger, but it remained small and delicate, its tiny fingers curling instinctively around Clara's own. Caring for the baby demanded constant attention. She fed it, kept it warm, soothed its cries, and watched for the slightest signs of illness or discomfort. Every task, though simple in action, felt monumental in importance. The child's life depended entirely on her. Outside, the settlement continued its quiet recovery from the storm. The snow, thick and pristine for days, began to settle into the earth, leaving trails of white that reflected the pale winter sun. People went about their daily routines, repairing homes, clearing paths, and tending to animals, but whispers of Clara's heroic act followed her wherever she went. Neighbors peeked curiously through frosted windows or lingered near her door, unsure whether to offer assistance or simply watch from a distance. Though some spoke words of admiration, others expressed unease. The baby belonged to the Comanche, a tribe known for its skill, courage, and fierce sense of family loyalty. What would happen if the tribe discovered a stranger had taken in one of their children? Clara did not know, and the uncertainty pressed heavily on her heart. Each night she remained vigilant. She kept the baby close, wrapped in warm blankets by the fire, listening to the wind whisper across the plains. At times she imagined distant riders in the snow, figures approaching through the drifting white. Fear and anticipation intertwined, making sleep impossible. Still, she reminded herself that she had acted out of kindness and necessity. The baby had no one else in that freezing storm, and Clara had intervened when survival demanded it. She understood that the coming days could bring confrontation or misunderstanding, but she hoped that her intentions would be recognized for what they were. Clara spent much of her time observing the baby, learning its tiny cues and needs. She noticed the way its small hands twitched when cold, how it cooed softly when she hummed a tune, and how its fragile eyes searched for comfort in hers, pain, despair. These small details became anchors for her, reminders of why she had risked her own safety in the storm. She spoke to the child in soft whispers, telling stories of the plains, of warm fires, and of hope. Though the baby could not yet understand her words, Clara sensed a growing trust forming between them. Each gentle stroke of its hair, each comforting embrace, deepened a bond born in the fiercest conditions. Despite her care, Clara could not ignore the reality that the Comanche were near. She had heard stories of their swift horses, their sharp eyes, and their deep devotion to family. Their children were sacred, and any harm or perceived disrespect toward one could lead to serious consequences. Clara's mind often wandered to what might happen when the tribe discovered the baby with her. Would they understand her intentions? Or would they see only a stranger who had interfered in matters that did not concern her? Brèche. She tried to imagine their faces, the expressions of anger or relief, and how she might explain herself. The thought was both terrifying and necessary. In these quiet, tense days, Clara also reflected on her own life and what it meant to act with courage. She had always considered herself brave in ordinary ways, helping neighbors, mending fences, and tending animals, but nothing had prepared her for this. Nothing had prepared her for the sudden, absolute responsibility of saving a life in the harshest of conditions. Brèche. The blizzard had tested her fear, pride, and humility. The blizzard had tested her physically, but caring for the child tested her patience, her resilience, and her heart. It demanded more than strength. It demanded understanding, compassion, and unwavering attention. As she tended the baby, Clara began to prepare herself for the inevitable. She cleaned her home, ensuring the fire would burn steadily, and gathered fresh blankets and provisions. She practiced the words she might use when explaining the situation to the tribe. "I saved your child from the snowstorm," she rehearsed silently. "I only wanted to protect it." She hoped that honesty, clarity, and her evident care for the child would be enough. Rasp. Still, the thought of hundreds of warriors approaching her door in a single moment made her stomach tighten with tension. During the afternoons, Clara sometimes ventured outside, cautiously, to fetch water or check her surroundings. Bist. Each time, she felt the emptiness of the plains, the frozen winds cutting across her face, the isolation of her home standing alone amid the snow. She wondered if anyone had seen her during the storm, if neighbors had noticed the baby, or if the tribe had already begun to search. Each passing hour was filled with a mixture of hope and apprehension. She imagined the reunion between child and family, the possible gratitude, and the consequences of misunderstanding. At night the cold deepened, and the silence was almost unbearable. Clara often sat by the fire with the baby nestled in her arms, staring into the flickering flames and thinking about the people she had never met, the tribe to whom the baby belonged. Round and desperate, she tried to imagine their daily lives, their routines, and the value they placed on family. Though she knew only fragments of their culture from stories and distant observation, she respected their strength and their connection to the land. She hoped that respect would be evident in her actions, that her care for the child would be clear even before words were exchanged. The baby's growth, though slow, was steady. Its tiny fingers began to move with more purpose, its eyes focused more intently, and its cries became softer, replaced by small coos and murmurs. Clara took these signs as encouragement, proof that her vigilance was making a difference. She spent hours singing softly, telling stories of the warmth of home, and humming tunes that seemed to soothe both of them. The bond between caregiver and child deepened with every passing day, a silent acknowledgement of trust and safety that grew stronger than words could express. One afternoon, as the sun reflected off the snow in dazzling patterns, Clara noticed distant figures moving along the horizon. At first, she thought it was a trick of the light, shadows cast by clouds drifting across the plains. But then she saw the rhythm of horses, the precision of movement, and her heart skipped a beat. The sight was unmistakable. Riders were coming. Her mind raced with questions. Were they the Comanche, searching for the child? Or were they neighbors curious about the rumors that had spread? She felt a mixture of fear and hope, her pulse quickening as the riders drew closer. Clara's first instinct was to protect the baby, to hide it if necessary. She wrapped the child tightly in blankets, holding it close against her chest. She whispered soothing words, calming both herself and the small life in her arms. Every noise outside, the crunch of hooves on snow, the distant call of a bird, the whisper of wind through trees, heightened her awareness. Breaths. She felt the weight of responsibility like never before. The outcome of this encounter could change everything, yet she knew she could not falter. The child's safety depended on her courage, her honesty, and the respect she showed to those approaching. Bows. Hours seemed to stretch into an eternity as the figures drew closer. Clara moved to the window, her eyes scanning every detail. The riders were numerous, moving with coordination and purpose. Their clothing, horses, and stance suggested experience, strength, and a deep sense of unity. Clara understood immediately that these were no ordinary travelers. They were members of the Comanche tribe, and they were coming for the child. Her mind whirled with possibilities. Would they be angry, or would they recognize her compassion? How would she explain that the baby's survival had depended entirely on her actions during the blizzard? As evening fell, casting long shadows across the snowy plains, Clara felt a mixture of dread and anticipation. She prepared herself for the encounter, arranging blankets and lighting the fire, making the home as welcoming as possible under tense circumstances. The baby slept peacefully, unaware of the storm of emotion and uncertainty swirling around it. Clara held the child close, whispering again, "It's going to be okay. I will do my best to make them understand." She drew a deep breath, steeling herself for the moment she knew must come. The day when the Comanche would arrive to claim their child, and when her courage, compassion, and honesty would be tested like never before. Pale, with the pale winter sun reflecting off the snow-covered plains, casting long shadows across Clara's small home. The wind had calmed somewhat, leaving the world outside still and silent. But inside, Clara's heart raced. She could sense that today would be different. There was a tension in the air, an invisible weight pressing on her chest. For days she had prepared herself for this moment, the moment when the Comanche would arrive to claim the child she had saved during the blizzard. The anticipation was almost unbearable, and yet she knew that she could not falter. The baby's safety, and perhaps her own peace of mind, depended on her courage and composure. She held the child in her arms, its small body warm against her chest. Breath. Its tiny hands clutched at her coat, as if sensing the gravity of the moment, though it did not understand why. Clara whispered softly. It's going to be all right.
We'll face this together. Her voice was steady, but her mind raced with questions.
How many would come? Would they be angry? Would they understand that her only intention had been to save the baby's life? The uncertainty gnawed at her, yet she refused to let it show. She straightened her shoulders, adjusted her hair, and walked to the front door, ready to meet whatever fate awaited her. In the distance, a sound reached her ears, the rhythmic pounding of hooves on snow. Clara's heart skipped a beat. She stepped to the window and saw them, a group of Comanche warriors moving with a striking combination of speed and order. The number was far greater than she had imagined. Easily over 100 riders, all dressed in traditional attire, their faces focused and serious. Horses with thick winter coats carried them swiftly across the plains. The sight was both awe-inspiring and terrifying. Clara took a deep breath, clutching the baby tighter, feeling the small, fragile body against hers. Brass. She knew that this was the moment she had been preparing for, yet nothing could fully ready her for the reality. The warriors drew closer, forming a line that seemed to stretch endlessly across the horizon. Their leader, an elder with a calm but commanding presence, rode slightly ahead of the group. His eyes, sharp and observant, scanned the snow-covered landscape until they rested on Clara's home. The leader nodded slightly to his companions, and they slowed as they approached the door. Clara's heart pounded in her chest. The warriors dismounted gracefully, moving with precision and purpose. Yet there was a certain respect in their posture. She realized that these were not individuals driven by anger alone. They were a united group, guided by leadership, tradition, and a deep sense of family. Clara opened the door slowly, holding the baby close to her chest. The cold wind rushed in, carrying with it the scent of horses, leather, and winter plains. The warriors stopped a few feet away, forming a semicircle around her. The elder stepped forward, his gaze fixed on the child. Grasp. Clara felt the weight of his stare, the intensity of his focus, yet she did not flinch. She took a deep breath and spoke clearly, hoping her words conveyed the truth of her intentions. I found this baby during the blizzard, she said. It was alone in the snow and in danger. I could not leave it to die. I only wanted to keep it safe. The elder's eyes softened slightly, though his expression remained serious. He nodded slowly, as if acknowledging her courage. But Clara could see the other warriors observing her, their eyes sharp and wary, yet not hostile. The tension in the air was palpable, but she felt a small sense of relief. She had explained herself honestly, and though she did not yet know how it would be received, she had done all she could to act with respect and care. The leader extended a hand toward the baby, his movements deliberate and gentle. Clara handed the child to him with the utmost care, making sure the baby remained warm and secure. The elder cradled the child briefly, then looked into Clara's eyes. His voice was calm but filled with authority.
You saved this child's life, he said.
Breath.
For that we honor you. Your courage and kindness have not gone unnoticed.
Clara felt a rush of relief and gratitude. The fear that had gripped her for days began to melt away. She had been prepared for confrontation, but instead she received acknowledgement, respect, and gratitude. The other warriors stepped forward one by one, some offering quiet nods, others speaking words of thanks in their own language. Clara felt overwhelmed by the sheer number of people and the weight of their respect. The baby, now cradled safely in the elder's arms, seemed to sense the change in atmosphere. It stirred slightly but did not cry, as if understanding that it was finally among its people. Clara watched, her heart full, as the bond between the child and the tribe became evident. Breaths. She realized that her actions had not only saved a life but had also built a bridge between two worlds, her own and that of the Comanche. The elder spoke again, this time addressing the group. Words were exchanged, brief but full of meaning, and Clara could see the sense of unity and gratitude among the warriors. They presented her with gifts, blankets, dried foods, and small handcrafted items, symbols of respect and appreciation. Clara accepted them with humility, understanding that these gestures represented far more than material value. They represented trust, honor, and a recognition that her actions had been selfless and true. For the first time in days, Clara felt a sense of peace. The tension that had weighed on her since the blizzard lifted, replaced by a quiet joy. She had acted out of instinct and compassion, and the outcome had surpassed her hopes. The child was safe, the tribe was grateful, and she had earned their respect. As the warriors prepared to leave, the elder approached her once more. He spoke with a calm authority that carried both gratitude and wisdom.
Your heart is brave, he said. You have saved one of ours, and for that we are forever thankful.
You are welcome among us, whenever you wish. Clara felt tears prick her eyes. The fear, the tension, and the uncertainty of the past days seemed to dissolve in the warmth of gratitude and acknowledgement. She had faced the storm, both literal and figurative, and emerged stronger, with a profound understanding of courage, compassion, and the power of selfless action. The baby, now safe in the arms of its people, looked up at her with small, trusting eyes, and Clara knew that the bond they had formed would never be forgotten. As the warriors mounted their horses and prepared to leave, Clara watched them move across the plains, a wave of respect and admiration washing over her. The snow shimmered in the late afternoon sun, and the world felt quiet, almost sacred. She understood that her life had changed in ways she could not fully comprehend. The experience had taught her about the strength of the human heart, the importance of compassion in the face of danger, and the connections that could be formed even between strangers from different worlds. Clara returned inside, sitting quietly by the fire. She reflected on the past days, the blizzard, the discovery of the baby, the constant vigilance, and now the arrival of the Comanche warriors. Each moment had been a test of courage, patience, and heart, and she had faced them all. She felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing that her actions had made a difference not only in the life of the child, but also in the relationship between her and the tribe. Even as night fell and the world outside grew dark and silent, Clara remained by the fire, thinking of the child and the warriors who had just departed. She understood that the bond formed that day, born in the harshest winter conditions, was one of respect, gratitude, and humanity. It was a reminder that acts of kindness, no matter how small, could have profound consequences, bridging worlds and hearts in ways that might never be fully measured. The memory of the blizzard and the frozen plains would always remain with Clara, but so too would the warmth of the child's small body in her arms, the trust in its eyes, and the gratitude of a proud, noble people. She had faced fear and uncertainty, yet through compassion and courage, she had created a moment of connection that would endure far beyond the frozen winter and the snow-covered plains. In the quiet of that evening, Clara felt a sense of closure mixed with awe. She had acted without expectation, driven only by the instinct to protect and preserve life. In return, she had received not only gratitude, but also understanding and honor. The story of the child and the brave woman who saved it would travel across the plains, whispered among neighbors, and carried in the memories of the Comanche. It was a story of courage, compassion, and the undeniable truth that even in the coldest, most dangerous circumstances, kindness could prevail, creating bonds that transcended fear, language, and culture. After the Comanche warriors had departed, Clara stood at the edge of her doorway, watching their figures disappear across the snowy plains. The sun had begun its slow descent, casting long golden shadows that shimmered against the white landscape. The wind had calmed, leaving a peaceful silence in its wake, broken only by the soft rustle of her own clothes and the distant call of a bird.
She felt a profound sense of relief, knowing that the baby she had saved was now safely back in the hands of its family.
And yet there was more than relief in her heart. There was a deep, unshakable sense of connection, an understanding that her actions had created ripples far beyond what she could see. Clara returned inside, closing the door gently behind her, and sat by the fire. The warmth spread slowly through her body, but her mind remained alive with memories of the past days, the blizzard, the desperate cries of the baby, and the tense hours spent awaiting the arrival of the Comanche. Each memory carried with it a lesson. She thought about courage not as a grand heroic act, but as the quiet determination to do what was right when it mattered most. She thought about patience, the kind that is tested in long, sleepless nights, when worry gnaws at the edges of the mind and the future feels uncertain. She thought about compassion, a force that could bridge worlds and hearts, transcending fear, culture, and language. Neighbors began to approach, cautiously at first, and then with growing warmth as word of the encounter spread. They spoke of the bravery it took to save the baby during the blizzard, of the tension she had endured while caring for the child, and of the extraordinary courage displayed when facing the approaching warriors. Brought gifts of food, blankets, and small tokens of admiration, while others simply offered kind words and smiles. Clara accepted them all with humility, but her thoughts remained with the child and its family, now safe and unharmed. She understood that the gratitude of her neighbors was comforting, but it could not replace the quiet satisfaction she felt in knowing that she had acted from the heart. Days passed, and life slowly returned to a gentle rhythm. Raven continued her daily routines, gathering firewood, preparing meals, tending to her small garden, and helping neighbors when needed. Yet, every so often she would pause and think of the child she had saved. She imagined its tiny hands reaching for its parents, its small eyes lighting up with recognition, and the smiles of its family as they embraced their child once more. The thought filled her with warmth and a profound sense of purpose. She realized that the world, vast and often unpredictable, was still capable of moments of extraordinary kindness and connection. One afternoon, Clara received an unexpected visit. A small group of Comanche, led by the same elder who had first approached her home, came to speak with her. They carried gifts, handcrafted blankets, beads, and a small carving of a horse, each symbolizing respect, gratitude, and honor. The elder spoke first, his voice calm and steady, filled with sincerity. "You acted with courage and wisdom,"
he said.
"You saved a life when it could have been lost. For that, our family honors you."
You are always welcome among us. Clara felt her eyes fill with tears, touched deeply by the gesture.
She had not acted with the expectation of recognition, yet the respect and trust she received were profound. The elder continued, explaining the importance of the baby within the tribe. The child was the youngest of a family line that held deep cultural and spiritual significance. Its survival was not merely a matter of life and death, but a symbol of continuity, strength, and hope for the community. Clara listened with awe, realizing that her actions had prevented not only the loss of a life, but also the heartbreak of a family and the potential disruption of traditions cherished for generations. The magnitude of her decision, once weighed only in the simple terms of saving a child from a blizzard, now carried layers of meaning she had not fully understood. The Comanche visitors stayed for several hours, sharing stories of the tribe, their lives on the plains, and the history of their people. Clara listened intently, fascinated by their wisdom, resilience, and deep connection to the land. The conversations were gentle, yet full of meaning. They spoke of honor, of courage, of family, and of the bonds that link people together, no matter how distant or different they may seem. Clara felt honored to be included even briefly in these stories, recognizing that her actions had created a bridge of trust and understanding between her and the tribe, As the visitors prepared to leave, the elder approached Clara once more. He placed the small carved horse in her hands, a symbol of gratitude and friendship. "You have reminded us that kindness is the greatest courage," he said.
Your heart has shown us that even strangers can act with honor. Never forget that your actions, though simple to you, have changed our lives forever.
Clara accepted the gift with humility, feeling the weight of its significance. She understood that the story of that blizzard, the fragile baby, and the brave act of a stranger would be carried in memory far longer than she could imagine. Once the Comanche had departed, the plain seemed quieter than ever, yet the silence was no longer empty. Clara felt a deep sense of peace, as though the world itself had acknowledged the courage and compassion she had displayed. She thought about the lessons she had learned, about bravery, kindness, patience, and the invisible threads that connect people across cultures. She knew that these lessons would stay with her for the rest of her life, guiding her in both ordinary and extraordinary moments. The baby's survival had also left an indelible mark on Clara's heart. She understood that even the smallest acts of compassion could have far-reaching consequences. Saving one life could ripple outward, touching many more, creating bonds of trust, gratitude, and understanding that might never be fully measured. In a world often filled with fear and uncertainty, she had witnessed firsthand how courage and selflessness could light the darkest hours.
Clara began to document her experiences, not for fame or recognition, but to preserve the memory of the extraordinary days she had lived.
She wrote about the storm, the baby's cries in the snow, her own fear and determination, and the arrival of the Comanche warriors. Each word was infused with emotion, reflection, and a desire to capture the lessons she had learned. She hoped that someday someone might read her account and understand the quiet power of compassion and courage. Neighbors continued to visit, bringing news, small gifts, and curiosity. But Clara always found herself returning to the same thoughts. The baby, the Comanche, and the profound bond that had formed in the midst of a snowstorm. Breaths. She realized that her life had been touched by something greater than herself. A reminder that even ordinary people could rise to extraordinary challenges when faced with moments that demanded heart, bravery, and selflessness. As the weeks turned to months, the memory of the blizzard began to fade from the plains, but for Clara it remained vivid. The snow, the wind, the fear, and the desperate struggle to save a life were etched permanently into her mind and heart. The gratitude of the Comanche, their visit, and the bond formed between cultures became a story she carried proudly, a story of courage, compassion, and the extraordinary power of kindness in the harshest of conditions. One quiet evening, Clara walked to the edge of the plains, watching the sun dip below the horizon, painting the sky with hues of orange, pink, and gold. She felt a sense of closure and contentment. Despair. She had faced fear, uncertainty, and the harsh forces of nature. She had acted with compassion and courage, and in return she had witnessed the beauty of trust, gratitude, and connection. The plains, once harsh and unforgiving, now felt alive with meaning, a testament to the human capacity for kindness even in the most difficult circumstances. Clara returned home, sitting beside the hearth once more. But she thought of the baby, now safely back with its family, and felt a quiet pride. Her actions, though small in scale, had created ripples of hope, gratitude, and understanding that extended far beyond her imagination. She understood that the true reward was not recognition or gifts, but the knowledge that she had acted rightly, guided only by compassion and courage. In the end, Clara realized that the story of the blizzard, the fragile child, and the brave act of a stranger was more than an event in her life. It was a lesson about humanity, about the power of courage and compassion, and about the ways in which even a single act of kindness could create lasting bonds between people, communities, and cultures. She understood that life was fragile, but that courage and heart could overcome fear, danger, and uncertainty.
As the final light of day faded and the stars began to sparkle across the clear winter sky, Clara sat quietly, reflecting on all that had happened.
The snow had melted, the blizzard had passed, and the plains had returned to their serene state. But the memory of those extraordinary days, the struggle, the fear, the compassion, and the gratitude remained vivid. Oh, she smiled softly, knowing that she had not only saved a life but had been part of something much larger, a story of courage, trust, and the enduring power of the human heart.